when you think about students with learning difference, some of them actually may not even know that they have learning difference. So as schools are moving more and more to digital tools and also moving away from textbooks, I think there's a really big risk that they will be leaving the students that may or may not know they have learning difference behind.
Welcome to Socially Conscious AI, where we showcase innovative AI applications for social good and interview the experts and thought leaders shaping the future of AI with a focus on ethical and inclusive practices. I'm Roman Burkott, and I'm here with my co-host, Valencio Cardoso. Valencio?
Thanks, Roman. Today we're joined by Matthew Yip, Head of Product and Engineering at Benetech, a nonprofit dedicated to using technology for social good. With a background in tech, including his work at Rosetta Stone, Matthew now leads efforts to create accessible educational tools like Bookshare, the world's largest accessible digital library. We're excited to discuss AI, education, and technology's role in driving social impact. Matthew, welcome to the show.
Yeah, thank you both for having me.
So Matthew, can you share a bit about Benetech's mission and how your role as a product and engineering leader supports this vision?
So Benetech is a really unique organization. It's in the intersection of nonprofit and technology. So the company's mission is to make education accessible, especially for students with learning differences such as visual impairment or dyslexia. So we are perhaps one of the biggest open secrets in EdTech. We run one of the largest online libraries in the world, and it's free and unlimited for all students with learning differences. The chances are, if you hear about a book, we would have it in the collection. I joined Benetech as the head of product and engineering after 17 years in big tech and startups. I've always been a builder, always passionate about solving problems. And my career have taken me from building unicorn startups from the ground up to turning public companies like Rosetta Stone around to focus on innovation. And when I discovered the impact that Benetech has on students, I knew that this is where I wanted to help. Well, today my role feels a lot more like any head of product or engineering in a mission-driven tech company. I'm responsible for the tech vision, strategy, turning a mission into a reality. And I work with the other leaders in the team and also other funders in the world to really build on programs and the go-to-market plans. And I would say that one of the favorite thing I always do is I always try to carve out time to read our user feedback and also talk to our students. One of the most energizing things for me to do is really hear the stories of how we can enable students access the books they need. Bookshare and Benetech has been around for over 20 years. And today you have a generation of young professionals who grew up with Bookshare, reading the textbooks that we had on the platform. As a father, as a problem solver, this is incredibly rewarding.
Yeah, wow. 20 years. My understanding is that Benetech was one of the first organizations to focus on using technology for social good. What's your approach to innovating with AI?
I think when it comes to innovation in nonprofit, there's a major difference between a venture-backed tech company and a nonprofit like Benetech, and it's about funding. So when we talk to nonprofit funders, some of them may be new to funding technology in startups, and it's really my job to explain how we can use technology, how we use our funding for research, prototype, and scaling. For example, we're launching this new feature in a few weeks, which enable any students with the Bookshare Reader app to take a picture, to upload maybe a handout that they have in front of them, and be able to listen to what the handout says, to have the same way that they read a book in Bookshare today, and be able to listen to a math equation that a teacher may have given them. So we're lucky enough to find funders that understand how technology works and how they can fund new research in AI. But it's something that for me is an humbling experience. It's something new for me. We watch the trend. There's actually a major inflection point that came in April of this year when the American Disability Act, ADA, updated the Title II ruling, mandating all the schools, depending on how many students you have, to provide accessible digital material by 2026-27. And we talk about like 100,000 schools, over 100,000 schools in the US. When we talk to teachers, some of them may have handouts that they have collected over years. Some of them may have materials on Google Drive, and some of them may actually use a LMS in the next 2 years. So this really matches our vision to create accessible materials for all students. And internally, we are just launching a new initiative with a working title called Bookshare Plus. So in the next few years, I really want to take the technology that we have used today in translating books, and give the same platform to all schools in US so that they can turn any of the content they have accessible.
That's cool. You just mentioned Bookshare Plus. Do you want to mention where you're going with that in terms of direction?
Yeah, so Bookshare Plus is our working title of this initiative. For me, this actually means two things. For schools and school districts, this is a way for them to have a chance to seamlessly take any digital content they have and make those accessible. So what that means is, let's say if they have a handout that they have used for teaching math, for example, right? By having it on their Google Classroom, Bookshare Plus will be able to take that document, turn that accessible. So what that means is for a blind student, for example, they might be able to click listen and they can listen to what's on the page. For a student with dyslexia, for example, they can use the Bookshare reader and be able to use our tools to read each line of the handout, line by line, with highlights, with dyslexia font, with all the features that we have built in. So we're looking at this as a way to not just help the schools get through this Title II regulation, but really raising the floor as well, because we want to help students understand. For me, it's about understanding the materials. So there are other features we're actually planning and exploring as well with AI. So one of those is what we internally call a reading companion. So as imagine a student's actually reading this handout, there may be pictures on the page that does have a lot of context in it. We want to be able to use AI to describe what the image is and not describe the context of how that image relates to the rest of the text.
What's interesting in my world as a designer, we always say that if you design for accessibility, you kind of are helping everyone, right? That's kind of a
Mhm.
common saying with us. But then I feel like you've also mentioned that AI can sometimes make things worse by widening the gap for students in need. What are some of the challenges that AI poses for accessibility, and how are you thinking about tackling some of these?
We have all tested different versions of ChatGPT and all these different type of tools on the market, right? And while I think AI is a really powerful tool, definitely has its challenges in accessibility space. For a company like Benetech, we have been using AI to basically, we have been building our own AI models to understand math images and equations for quite some time. And as we look at the current iteration of large language model and other AI tools, there's always an inherent bias in the AI models. I mean, most large language models today are trained on everything on the internet. And even just typing in, if you type in prompts associated to learning difference, there's always some kind of biases that come with it. This can come with like hallucination that so exclude a misunderstanding needs of our target users, students actually need. So as we are building our AI model, we are really trying to tackle this head on. We are building our own data sets, get inputs from our internal staff who are experts in accessibility, get feedback from students as we build our features. I think the other challenge is the black box nature, right, of a lot of this AI algorithms. When you're dealing with educational content, you need to be able to explain why the AI made certain decisions. Quite honestly, every time I go to a teaching conference, teachers are trying to figure out how and when to use AI in the classrooms. And so when we're actually building some of this AI features that are rolling out in the next few months, we really spend a lot of time on trying to explain how our AI work to the educators. And also, we want to give ways for teachers to configure how they want to use it. Because there's no one size fit all. The way that one teacher uses it can be very different from a teacher, even in the same grade level.
General LLMs are different from what you're doing because what you're thinking about doing is fine tuning it for your population, right? And kind of reducing the biases based on what, like some of the parameters that you're mentioning. And on the other side, it's bringing to the general audience, hey, the transparency of how a particular decision was made, right? Or
Yep,
how a particular
exactly.
piece of information is surfacing. Just want to talk a little bit about education and AI integration around that. With schools moving away from traditional textbooks, how do you see AI playing a role maybe in the future of education?
As far as I can remember, schools are always saying that they're moving away from textbooks and using other mediums. And I think that shift has really accelerated during the pandemic. It's very common for a teacher to have more than 10 digital tools today in a classroom, right? And going back to the mission of Benetech, I mean, our sense is we want to do what we can do to help students and teachers with providing accessible access to education. So with the Bookshare Plus initiative, as we talked about, our goal is really to automatically take any content that the teacher may have stored in a Google Classroom or the LMS, create versions of this document so the students can actually read it in their own ways. The funny thing about the handout is when you think about students with learning difference, some of them actually may not even know that they have learning difference. There's a lot of statistics about how some communities actually shy away from doing this kind of analysis because they don't want to have the stigma associated to it. So as schools are moving more and more to digital tools and also moving away from textbooks, I think there's really big opportunity, really big risk that they will be leaving the students that may or may not know they have learning difference behind. And this is where I actually want to help. I really want to have Bookshare Plus go in and take any content that they have and just having a way that they can read the material. Student may choose to read it off the physical paper if they can, or they can read it off the Bookshare reader. They can listen to the text to speech that we generate using AI. We should give them freedom.
This discussion of the shift to digital textbooks really resonates with me and my family. It's been a huge struggle. I don't mind sharing that my son has dyscalculia, ADHD. And so these disembodied textbooks and handouts and assignments, it just gets overwhelming. I feel like because there's not a sense of place, like, back in my day, you'd have a piece of paper and a binder, and when you're trying to do your homework, you could flip to the right page. There's
Yep.
certain visual cues that can help make those things a little bit more prominent in your mind. It seems like you're really closely in contact with your target users, I assume, students of all ages. I'm curious if you guys are doing anything around the problem of just like organizing all of the content and assignments.
The reality is, I think every teachers teach differently.
Right.
There are teachers that we talk to that may have a collection of handouts and also curriculum they have collected over the last 10, 15 years. Some of those may be in a folder somewhere on the desk that they photocopy when the students needs it, or maybe it will be provided by the publisher when they got the curriculum, right? So I wouldn't say that it's our role as Benetech, especially as a nonprofit company, to really be the consolidator of all the content they have across the world, across the classrooms. We have to solve a need. We have to solve a need for the students. We have to solve a need for teachers. That's why when I think about Bookshare Plus, where we are really trying to take the way we remediate books to apply to handouts and also any materials they have, I'm looking as an enabler so that we can take things directly from the LMS learning management system, or giving the teachers a way to just take picture, upload themselves. We think that being there on the endpoint when they need it is a more efficient way for us to get to that. But yeah, maybe down the line, teachers may see that Bookshare is a much better way for them to distribute content.
I wanted to follow up just a little bit on something that I think the three of us are probably familiar with, but maybe a listener doesn't necessarily know what some of these enabling accessibility options are to be able to help people. So one that you mentioned specifically is using a dyslexia font. What are some of those specific features that could actually help a student that has a different learning style be better able to connect with the content?
As someone that has been building product for the last 17, 18 years, for me, there's a level playing field, like almost like table stakes that we had to build. And then there's other enablers that we can do with AI. So within the Bookshare reader, within our reading software today, you have a way to change the font. You have the way to change the contrast. You have a way to change the spacing of text, and you can listen to the book. You can play button, and we'll read it for you. Or we also use AI text to speech, so that someone maybe a blind student that are only listening to books on their browser device, then download any book that we have in MP3, and they can listen to the book wherever they go with AI voice. So there's a number of things we do within Bookshare today already. Now, it goes beyond just any standard. It goes beyond, for me, tab order, other things that you usually check for in a tech company. For me, it's really about how you can make it more useful. So beyond those accessibility features, we talked about self-creation, reading companion is something that I mentioned earlier. Like, I really want to have a way, so when a student is consuming a piece of content, maybe it's a textbook, maybe is a handout, they would have a way to interact with content. Some ways, shape or form, right? If we can actually personalize it for the students learning different, so when we describe an image, for example, instead of relying on just what is being by AI, we can actually personalize it so that the way we describe an image to a student that have no vision should be different than one that we describe to someone that has, for example. So that's where we want to go in terms of providing accessibility, not just color and font, but really providing help when they need it.
It sounds like, to Valencia's earlier point, kind of thing that would help students with learning challenges as well as everybody else. So, again, my son's current challenge is history. He just doesn't connect with the content, right? He's like, oh, there's a guy and a boat blew up and somebody went to war for whatever. Doesn't come alive for him. And we're just desperately trying to find ways to get it from the page into something that will actually resonate and teach them some of those important lessons in life.
It's really tough. I mean, yeah, history is tough when you have a lot of context, right? But also STEM is really difficult too. I mean, it's not the first time I hear like maybe opening a math textbook, right? So the student may open textbook. They see the section is about, like, let's say, quadratic equation, right? You read all the text about how a quadratic equation works, and then when it comes to the picture that depicts that parabola, that quadratic equation, it would just say this is a graph of quadratic equation. And if you're learning STEM, when you're trying to actually just learn the foundations of math, it's really, really hard, right? So imagine now that's one equation, but imagine like a scatter plot graph. Imagine that you have to learn a university level calculus equation. Like that having accessibility is important, but I think we need to do more than that. And this is where AI actually really comes in not just being able to turn and create a description, but really like creating ways that we can personalize help for students.
That's probably one of many challenges that you have to deal with. Given your background in tech, what are unique challenges in your world that you face when developing these socially impactful technologies at Benetech?
Well, coming from a world of tech startups to a nonprofit has been a very humbling journey. Not just because of the mission of the company, but the way that we think about building technology is I'm learning every day. Obviously, one of the major challenges that I have is what I call the impact versus innovation. In the startup world, the mantra is always, hey, move fast, maybe don't break things, and grow as fast as you can, right? I mean, growing would be like revenue or users. And when you're developing technology for students with learning difference, you can't break things. You don't want to break things. At the same time, you want to innovate on the cutting edge and with a lot of reliability. It's a delicate balance. Honestly, we spend a lot of time thinking about how and what we can do to do more accessibility testing, because we are leaders in this space. We want to actually show the world how we do it. So that's always an impact versus innovation speed kind of challenge that we have. The other innovation, I would say, coming from the for-profit world is something I like to call the impact quantification. So in my previous roles, I've been a VP of product, head of product for startups and public company, and revenue and market share always part of the job description. You may not say it, but honestly, it's on my OKR, right? And in most startups, in every funding round, you have 2 to 3 years runway. You get some millions of dollars to build a product and services, and you have to get a certain growth multiplier. And you're chasing that unicorn status or some kind of financial exit. It's really hard work, but that number is often very quantifiable. Like you look at that, you know how good or how bad you are doing. In a nonprofit like Benetech, I think the exit strategy is very different. It's about social impact. The paradigm shift has really changed the way that how I approach product development and funding. Like, yes, I mean, we have like quantifiable metrics. I can look at the number of people joining Bookshare and look at how many of them churn. But the real challenge is like, how do I measure the depth of breadth of the impact? A lot of those take a long time, right? I mean, we have now people that use Bookshare 20 years ago, and now maybe a engineer at Microsoft. It's like I did not know that when they first used Bookshare, right? So having to quantify the value of the impact we do beyond just reading session time, beyond just some small efficacy study is interesting. And sometimes a little bit hard to quantify to funders in the nonprofit world, because in technology, especially, I think technology is a way to scale really quickly. and you can see impact. You don't always get all the data. So it's about explaining the story. So it's about explaining the vision that for me is a little different.
Because of your North Star of accessibility and being detached from for-profit and being a nonprofit, you are almost innovating in these narrow spaces that I think it's super, super important. I think you mentioned funding, right? What does that mean as a nonprofit?
We are lucky enough that we have the backing of the Department of Education that has been rewarding us with funding to continue to work on Bookshare. The last round of funding they sent us was from 2022. And for a lot of the AI work that we do, we partner with a lot of funders separately on our AI effort. Some of them fund us on the research that we do as we think about this hypothesis, as we think about how um, uh, doing research on what users needs. Some of them fund us for some of these features, like building an integration to pull content from LMSs, to basically fund us for some of the AI work we do on crunching the data and training the data set with different educational content. So they are a lot of those are coming from private funders. And hopefully, as well as we are doing more, funders to join us as well on this journey.
Yeah, I totally support that cause and hope everybody else who's listening can support some of the work that you guys are doing. I know you mentioned Bookshare Plus. Can you tell us about any specific exciting projects that you're currently leading, or and what sort of impact that you're hoping these projects will have?
Yeah, Bookshare is still Bookshare Plus. We just kicked it off within the team last week. The vision is really to help schools remediate any content they have. We we are hoping that the way we allow students to remediate any content in front of them, maybe through right now the beta product that we have is going to be off the Bookshare reader on the iPhones. But I'm looking at this as only the start, right? A lot of the classrooms today have Chromebooks. Some of them have iPads. I would love to give that same ability to remediate any content in front of them onto those devices. So it can be anywhere when they need it, they can use it right away. I would love to basically build a better way to train teachers on how we can, like for me, when I look at Bookshare Plus, we talked about like Title II, we talked about innovation. At the end of the day, we're here to help educators. They are overworked. I mean, educators in US is overworked. How can we help them remove the burden of how to personalize every content for every student and be able to produce content in an accessible way so that when they have different students in class, some of them may have diagnosed with some learning difference, some of them may not. We can actually make it easy so that they can give the same content. We'll do all the heavy lifting for them, and the teacher can focus on just teaching. That's really ultimately where we want to go.
I particularly like that notion you're talking about of bringing into the modern age some of the legacy materials that are still good, but just aren't in a format that serves everybody. My experience, even just working with PDFs, is brutally difficult. I know it's supposed to be an open format, but it seems like my PDFs don't work with anything else. So I'm curious if you have had insights on how to drag some of that content into the modern era already, or is that a whole new adventure you're starting?
Funny thing about Bookshare is how do we get all the books into a collection? So the way it works is we actually work with publishers around the world, and thank you for the generous donations. We take in tens of thousands of books every month from publishers around the world, and we had the technology turn the books into different formats. Sometimes the book may come in EPUB formats, and what we do in-house is we use the technology to turn that into a MP3, into a BLF Braille format, or maybe just an EPUB that they can actually students can read with our accessibility tools. What we're doing here is just taking technology we have in-house already and building this into a platform so that we can take any other materials in and make those accessible. You're right. I think PDF is not the most accessible format in the world. A lot of the students actually sometimes tell me they prefer a Word document because they love all the tools inside Microsoft Word they can read and listen to, right? I'm looking at this from a technology perspective. The work that we do, if we go deeper, is really we identify what are the elements of the page. Where's header? Where's the paragraph? Where's the page number? Because those are the important parts of a document. And as long as we have the way to actually take those elements in and flatten the file in a way that the student can read, we can turn it into accessible format. And that's what we have been doing.
The other thing you mentioned that I'm very curious about is so the typical general use LLMs trained on general data sets aren't necessarily inclusive of people from underserved populations. What's your approach to creating the LLMs and sourcing the data that you need to create those in a way that really serves your purpose?
Yeah. Without getting too much into the weeds, I'm looking at the way that we leverage being a nonprofit. I mean, we don't have the funds or means to build our own large language model, right? So, but there are many things. I would describe large language model as um, something that is very knowledgeable, but sometimes naive in the way they describe things, right? So the way I would actually use large language model is to augment that with our own AI models, which are specialized on remediating and understand certain topics like math equations or STEM materials. And we use large language model as a way to leverage its ability to speak like a human to really help get the concepts across. Um, to help with the biases in large language model off the shelf, we use a mix of our own fine tuning and also rec so that we can feed in the information the way that we want information to convey. We use those techniques to help make that happen.
Is your app available to just anyone?
So today, Bookshare is only available or only usable for students that have a proof of disability. If a teacher knows that a student may have difficulty reading, they can come to Bookshare, register as a student, and use and download any books for free. In future, when we launch Bookshare Plus, I'm hoping that we can make this a much more open platform with the school's involvement.
I'm really impressed with your approach and your mission. Matthew, I really enjoyed getting to know you and learning about how Benetech is shaping the future of education.
Appreciate the two of you for starting this podcast. I think AI is such a fast-moving trend. A lot of people are trying different things. I think building AI in a sociable way, building for social good, I think is something that I'm really passionate about. And I want to thank the two of you for doing this podcast.
Thanks for joining us for the Socially Conscious AI podcast with our amazing guest, Matthew Yip. If you enjoyed this episode, please make sure to subscribe wherever you listen to podcasts. And why not share this episode with someone who could benefit from this conversation? For Roman Burkott, I'm Valencia Cardoso. Until next time, stay curious, stay conscious.